Well, I was sitting at my desk a few weeks ago after Colorado, but before the motorcycle ride to Ohio, and my phone rang, and it was a Quaker calling from out of state, a man I had met several years ago at a conference, and he called because their Quaker meeting, which is located in a very small town, is in decline. And he wanted to know if I had any suggestions that might revive their meeting. He said, our biggest problem is that people don't know we're here. I said, yes, that's a problem. If people don't know you're there, they can hardly visit. Now, can they? And I said, what have you done? He said, well, I suggested to the meeting that we run an advertisement in our local newspaper. It's free. They do that free for the churches. And I said, let's advertise in the newspaper. I said, how'd that go? He said, well, when I brought it up, some folks in the meeting were uncomfortable with that, believing that if God wanted people to come to their meeting, God would tell them directly, not through a newspaper. I felt a headache coming on. I said, do you have a website? Or maybe even a Facebook page? Facebook is free after all. He said, well, they didn't like that idea either. Have you encouraged them to invite their friends? 80% of the people who attend Quaker meetings do so because they were invited by a friend. He said, well, I would, but Quakers don't evangelize. I could feel the headache move across the top of my head and down my forehead and lodge between my eyes where it just pulsed away. I could actually feel that big vein there just pulse in and out. Oh, my Lord. Well, we've been talking about the things early friends got just right, and one of them was their comfort with innovation, with trying different things. They were not just comfortable with new forms of thinking and living, but when it became clear to them that their old world no longer worked, they welcomed innovation. When given the choice between innovation and tradition, early friends almost always innovated, almost always took the new path, the fresh direction. They practiced the Christian faith differently. They exercised power differently. They viewed women and people of color differently. They read and interpreted the Bible differently. And when given the opportunity, they governed differently. They were always willing to imagine living in a new way, a better way, a fresh way. A modern misconception of Quakers is that we are mired in the past, that we dress like people used to dress and talk like people used to talk, but that is a caricature of us, and like all caricatures, is a false and exaggerated impression. Do you know that one of the indicators of good mental health, perhaps one of the strongest indications of sound mental health, is our willingness and ability to embrace change? Without that ability, we perish. I've quoted this more than once, but the longer I live, the more I appreciate its truth, that it is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most adaptable to change. The one most adaptable to change. Case in point, last Sunday's New York Times had an article about the 2 remaining Shakers who live at Sabbath Day Lake in Maine. It was titled, "There Are Only 2 Shakers Left. They've still got utopia in their sights." Well, that's nice. It's good to have a goal, but for crying out loud, evolve. change, progress. Seriously, I mean, think about it for us. If you had to dress like a Quaker from the 1800s, would you still be a Quaker? I wouldn't be. If you couldn't enjoy music, would you still be a Quaker? Not me. If you had to visit other churches and stand during worship to argue with them about theology, would you still be a Quaker? I wouldn't be. Well, maybe I would be. Early Quakers believed their vitality was a sign of God's favor, which incidentally I have to tell you is always the go-to emotion when things are going well for you or for your group. Well, it's because we're experiencing God's favor because we're doing something right. Every religion, every person says that when times are good. God is rewarding our loyalty and devotion. But I have another theory about this, that I think their vitality stemmed from their determination to embrace innovation, to employ the most modern forms of communication to spread their message. Now, an early name for Quakers was Publishers of Truth. We were called that before we were called Quakers, Publishers of Truth, denoting their adoption of mass marketing or pamphleteering. Pamphleteering, those little pamphlets that you see now, that you only find now in the backs of restroom urinals and rest stops. Quakers invented those, I'll have you know. They published catchy titles such as False Prophets and False Teachers Described. And here was another one, Poems Intended to Promote Piety and Virtue in the Minds of Young People. And the much-loved pamphlet, Serious Considerations on Several Important Subjects vis-a-vis on War and its Inconsistency with the Gospel, Observations on Slavery, and Remarks on the Nature and Bad Effects of Spirituous Liquors. Pamphleteering was the 17th century version of Facebook, Instagram, and X rolled together. X, you'll remember, was formerly known as Twitter and is owned by Elon Musk, who was formerly known as Rational. Significant social movements take advantage of cultural progress and developments. Christianity did not become a world religion because Jesus discovered a new message. Almost everything Jesus taught was rooted in a Canaanite polytheistic religion that predated Jesus by 3,000 years. Christianity took root because the Roman Empire had spread across the known world, leaving in its wake a network of roads and a system of law that made possible the wide dissemination of beliefs and ideas. The Apostle Paul was able to travel to the capital of that empire, where his ideas were embraced, shared, and dispersed. Had Christianity been born in South Africa or the American West or Greenland, it would have been nothing more than a regional folk religion. That it lived and thrived is because the first Christians took full advantage of the innovations and advances of their day. This begs the question, do we, friends, today embrace cultural innovations that help us share our much-needed message with the wider world? Now, that is a collective question we can ask ourselves and keep in front of ourselves. But it is not just a collective question, it is a personal, individual question. Do I embrace modern developments in order to grow, develop, connect, and evolve? Or am I mired in senseless traditions that have lost their meaning and vitality? I have a friend who refuses to get an email address or a phone. And he always is asking me, why isn't anyone in touch with me? I said, you gotta meet him halfway. You gotta meet him halfway. You have to be willing to change. Danville had its annual fair on the square last week. The Catholics are right. There is a purgatory. So there I was, Joanne and I, and we were walking around looking at things, and I visited a booth. I saw the neatest booth I'd ever seen at the Danville Fair on the square, and I purchased a few posters for our meetings. You can see them on the doors leading into the hallways here. Perhaps you've even seen them already. But I found another one. The poster I didn't hang, I wanted you to see it together. Lynn, you can bring it up now. The one I didn't bring because I wanted you all to see it together is this one. It's written by a man named John A. Cuff. And I'm just going to hang it here. This is high tech now. You're not only getting an audio message, you're getting a visual message. Be brave enough to suck at something new. Be brave enough to suck at something new. We're going to hang that right there. Well, I thought we were. We are. There we go. Be brave enough to suck at something new. Early friends thrived because they were brave enough to suck at something new. Our meeting will thrive when we are brave enough to suck at something new. You will thrive. You will grow. You will evolve. You will experience joy when you are brave enough to suck at something new. So let's take a lesson from early friends. And what are we going to do? We're going to be brave enough to suck at something new. There you go.